Welcome to REM Reward, the podcast that explores the secrets of sleep and psychology. I'm your host, Ryan, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of sleep and other topics such as mental well-being and personal growth. If you want to unlock your full potential and receive the rewards that come with understanding the power of sleep, you're in the right place. To discover more tips and insights on improving your sleep and overall well-being, visit our website and explore our other episodes at remreward.org. Professor Sarah Blunden is a clinical psychologist, researcher, and international expert in pediatric sleep. She is director of the Sensible Sleep program and serves as adjunct professor of psychology and pediatric sleep at CQUniversity's Appleton Institute of Behavioral Science. She is also an adjunct senior research fellow at Monash University. Her research focuses on childhood sleep, family well-being, and culturally informed approaches to sleep health. She has published widely developed evidence-based interventions like the gentle methods of self-settling and works with families, schools, and health professionals to improve sleep outcomes for children worldwide. Alrighty, so for my first question, it is what inspired your lifelong focus on children's sleep, and how did sensiblesleep.com come about?
Okay, so I had a previous career prior to being a psychologist. I was actually a ballet dancer, and I danced for as long as I could. Ballet dancing is a short career. And so after that, I realized I had to get a real job. And so I decided to go to university, and I was going to do theatre management, which is where my heart lay because I had spent all my time in theatre. But I took psychology as a major, and I went, this is actually pretty cool. So I kept going through that, and I ended up doing a PhD. I didn't really mean to do that. I just wanted to get enough qualifications to get a job. So then I just by chance fell into the research component of my psychology degree was in children's sleep, not because I sought it out, but because it was the one that was available. And I wanted to work with children. So that was the only one that was available.
Right.
And of course I went in there, and much like you just told me, I just went, sleep is really interesting and really cool. And there's so much about it that I don't know. So I then started researching sleep, and I opened up my clinic as soon as I finished my PhD, and I had been running it one day a week while I was doing my university professorship. As I came through, I realized that most particularly for young children and young families, there is a whole lot of information and misinformation about what sleep is, what it should be, and how you can manage it. And as a psychologist, and therefore not a physiologist, it's not the physiology of sleep that interested me. It's the behavior around sleep,
Right.
the stresses around sleep, all those kind of psychological components. So I spent a lot of time then working with families and trying to make their lives better, because sleep is a tough gig when you're a parent with young children, and even when you're a young child and maybe you don't sleep well for a whole range of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I developed initially the Australian Centre for Education in Sleep, because my dream was to have a website where everybody would put their stuff about sleep education up there and make it available for free to whoever wanted it. That kind of didn't come around because I didn't realize, of course, that everybody wants to make money out of sleep. Why wouldn't they? And so Sensible Sleep was the next iteration of that. And Sensible Sleep contains all the components of my work. That would be clinical work, service delivery, books, podcasts, free resources, and of course my academic stuff. And that's all contained in Sensible Sleep.
Wow, what a wonderful story. Thank you for that.
Cheers.
And what you've been researching and what have you seen so far, what are the most common, sleep problems you see in infants and young children today?
Okay, so probably the most common is that infants and young children, older children too, interestingly, but they need for someone or something to be with them when they go to sleep. Wow. Now that could be a television, it could be a bottle, it could be mum's breast, it could be a parent sitting holding their hand, it could be co-sleeping, it could be a phone, a whole range of things that a child will need to get to sleep. Now that in of itself is not a problem, but as a young child, infant, toddler, school-age child, if I can't get to sleep without my parent or my caregiver, and then I wake up at nighttime because night waking is completely normal and completely natural, when I wake up and I don't have the same set of circumstances in the middle of the night as I had at the beginning of the night, that is, I'm co-sleeping, I'm hugging mum, I'm hugging dad, I'm doing something, then I want to get it again because that makes me feel comforted. I like it. It makes me feel safe and I need it. Now, when I say I want it or I need it, children that need that to get to sleep are those children that might be more sensitive or might have a history of trauma, if I want to go into that, but a whole range of reasons why that child would need somebody to be asleep. Not want, but need. They simply cannot get to sleep without a great deal of assistance from their parent. That then becomes a problem because the parent will need to attend to them overnight, not just once, sometimes up to 5, 6, 7 times a night. And that becomes unsustainable for the family. And that's where the vast majority of behavioral sleep medicine sits. That's what we psychologists call ourselves, behavioral sleep medicine psychologists.
Wow, that's a super interesting point. I never even thought of that. Yeah. Wow, super interesting.
Uh-huh.
And I guess jumping off that, you developed the gentle methods of self-settling. Can you explain a little bit about that approach and how it differs from other traditional sleep training?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so going back to the infants and the toddlers then, so let's say we have a little person who is needing a parent to be with them to get to sleep. And they might be sitting in the room, they might be lying on the bed with them. Now that little person, to get out of the room, to get that child to be able to learn to sleep alone, there are several common ways that are used to get that to happen. And the most common of all is that you let your little person go to bed, you give them a bedtime routine, you put them in the bed, you say, okay, little Johnny or little Sally, I'm going to go now and you're going to go to sleep and it's all going to be wonderful and bye-bye and I'll close the door and out I go. And the little person goes, no, I don't want to do that. So they start to cry. Parents will feel a pull and a push in this possibility. The pull of going to a crying child, the push of making that child learn to sleep alone because the parent simply cannot get up overnight or they simply can't be with them to sleep with them. Maybe there's other children, maybe there's stress in the household. There's a whole range of reasons why it's just not possible to attend to that child. So that has become, it's because it's a really good question, Ryan, that has become a really fraught and hot debate in the academic and literature and the social narrative about how you get a child to learn to sleep alone.
Right.
And the vast majority of, as I said, ways to do that, to manage that, is to leave that child to cry in their room alone, either completely all night long or periodically that parent will go back into the room and attend to them briefly, pat them on the head, do whatever, and leave again. So the child cries a lot by themselves until they learn, in inverted commas, to get back to sleep. So that has been common. And as I was coming through my studies and in clinical practice, many parents said to me, I don't want to leave my child to cry alone. I don't do that in the day. Why would I do that at night? There must be another way to get this to happen without leaving them to cry. And that's how GEMS developed. I've developed this method so that parents can learn to disassociate from as intense attention. So reducing the amount of attention that they give to a child or an infant to get to sleep, slowly, gradually, so that the child gets used to less of mum or dad or caregiver. And once they get used to it, we reduce it again and we reduce it again. So rather than ignoring the child completely, I say, well, let's go to the child and just do less every time. And if we can explain to the child, if it's a toddler or a school-age child, we say, okay, Johnny, I'll come back in 5 minutes and I'll pat your head and that's all I'm going to do. But I will come back and pat your head, as opposed to I'm not going to come back at all. You're going to be by yourself and you're just going to have to work it out. So for the children that need specifically a parent and find it very difficult to do that without, then the GEMS method works. And I've done randomized controlled trials to make sure that they do as good a job as all the other types of management. And that's why it has now taken on a wave of popularity
Hmm.
because certainly in Australia, I think I'm not so sure about the States so much yet, but there is a wave of popularity in the community of parents who do not want to leave their child to cry, and
Right.
that's why the GEMS method is successful.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like you're kind of finding that middle line balance and kind of slowly
Yeah,
working the child down to not even need the parental, I guess, help at some point, which is
yeah, that's a really
amazing.
good point. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
That's
yeah.
a really good point because I guess if your child is waking up a lot, well, they do wake up a lot, but if your child needs you to attend to them overnight, you either have to ignore them completely or co-sleep with them to make it work. And as you said, the GEMS method is a middle of the road.
Right.
We
Yeah.
do a bit of both, but we never ignore the child because I just don't think that's right.
Yeah.
And we teach that child to learn to adapt to less.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. That's really, really amazing. Um, and that's talking about sleep, or this is a whole podcast about sleep, but I guess sleep schedules. What are your thoughts on structured sleep schedules where children are taught to sleep at certain times, regardless of their individual needs?
I think that's a really good question. And because you've done your homework about sleep, you'd know that the big international lobby groups about sleep, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the Australasian Sleep Association, International Pediatric Sleep Association, all of which I'm a member, all have guidelines around what you should or shouldn't do to make sure that we have optimal sleep health. And routines are very important.
Hmm.
The problem is that no two children, no two people are the same. No two people feel the same at bedtime because we have the psychological component of, am I able to sleep by myself? Do I feel fearful at night? Am I stressed? Am I traumatized? Am I an anxious person by predisposition? What's going on for me psychologically? So how do I feel about being made to sleep at a certain time? Am I sensitive to the environment, the light, the timing? Or a physiological issue where some children just don't need as much sleep as other children. And that's not just applying to children, it applies to adults as well.
Right.
In fact, you probably know that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine has put out a range of sleep guidelines for the duration, the amount of sleep that we need. And you'd see if you look them up, and I can send that to you just for your interest if you want. The range of sleep need for, let's say, a school-age child ranges somewhere between 9 hours a night, 8 hours a night to 12 hours a night. So that means that the range of need varies from one child to the next child enormously.
Right.
So then if we were to say there is a blanket rule that you must put your child down at 7 p.m. at night and they must sleep for 12 hours and they must wake up at 7 in the morning, that's just not tenable because it just doesn't apply to every child. So
Yeah.
what I try and help parents with, and this is hard because parents don't get sleep education or awareness training when they're pregnant or when they're with their young babies. They don't get any training pretty much in Australia, standard. It's not systematic, and it's certainly not targeted at the particular family. So many a parent will come into me and say, my child's waking up at night. That's correct. They will, they must, they do. They don't fall asleep at 7 o'clock. Well, maybe they're not tired enough. Maybe
Right.
your child needs less sleep. Maybe there's something else going on. So I try and help my parents to learn to watch and learn from their children. And it's interesting because in the daytime when you're parenting and you're learning about your child, and parenting's a tough gig anyway, but when you've got a little person that's kind of showing you their temperament and they're showing you that they're not really that flash on doing things the way that all the people in their class does, it doesn't mean to say that they're wrong or right or bad or good. It just means that they're different.
Right.
And we don't deal with difference very well, we human beings. So reading your child, understanding what they need and what they want, and then trying to adapt that to a social construction, then that's where I stand.
Yeah.
So a standard one size fits all doesn't work. Is essentially that was a very long answer to say that simple phrase.
No, and I think that long answer was necessary. I think a lot of people believe sleep is a kind of a cookie cutter situation. They see
Yeah,
the numbers online or the guidelines online. They think, oh, like this is what I'm going to do. But it's really important to emphasize that everyone is different. It's kind of a trial and error type of thing to see what works for you or your child. And it was a great long answer that was needed, I think. Yeah.
cheers, thanks.
Okay, yeah. So on to my next question. So I guess maybe when parents still are working it out, or a child doesn't really get that good sleep they need, how does poor sleep impact a child's emotional, behavioral, and cognitive development?
Mm. Wow, that's six podcasts in itself, I reckon, that one. Um, Sleep is really the third pillar of good health. You've got diet, you've got exercise, and you've got sleep. And sleep has only just been of enough interest to have people like you doing podcasts about it in the last, I'm going to say 10, 15, maybe 20
Right.
years. So it really is trying to play catch up, but sleep affects everything: physiological, psychological, psychosocial. So let's go emotional, behavioral, and cognitive, because that's where the psychology sits really. Is the part of our brain that needs the most sleep is the prefrontal cortex at the front of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for most things higher order learning, that is language, calculation, problem solving, behavioral and emotional regulation. Pretty much, I've got a problem, how do I fix it?
Right.
Is the prefrontal cortex's job. So if the prefrontal cortex doesn't get the sleep that it needs, and that, of course, is a fraught question, because how much sleep does it need? But once it gets the sleep it needs, it can handle all that stuff very well. Now, if it doesn't, it can't handle it. And then we turn into, right, not only can I not handle this problem that I've got in front of me, but then I get frustrated and angry and sometimes aggressive, depending on how much sleep I have lost or I am in need of. And then I'm going to start behaving badly. That's behavior and emotion. But of course, I'm also not able to attend and focus and concentrate. And so that then has a relationship to my academic performance. Well, learning to start with, but of course, my academic performance. I'm just not going to be on top of my game. And I have a little anecdote that I tell my parents when they come into my clinic, that, a little person who starts school, so in Australia, that's at the age of 5, and they will, they're not getting good sleep. They're not getting good enough sleep. Their sleep quality is not good. So they're really not on top of their game.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst they're not in school, that's probably possible. They can probably, get on, they can talk okay, everything's going okay. But they get to school and then they have to learn concepts like counting and language. And those concepts are hard to grasp if you're just not on top of it.
Right.
So little Johnny goes to school and he's learning his 2 times tables, and 2 times tables are pretty easy. 1 times tables are pretty easy. Time goes on, he's still not sleeping well. Now he's learning his 3s and his 5s and his 6s, and they're getting harder. And you know what? He didn't really grasp the 1s and 2s because he just can't keep it in his head, because he can't concentrate. And not only does sleep help us focus, but it helps us consolidate learning. So if we don't get sleep, we don't get either of those. And little Johnny hasn't got the 1 times tables, let alone the 3s or the 7s. And so therefore, little Johnny gets labelled as being a bit slow.
Yeah.
He just can't do his maths. So that's painting a pretty nasty picture, but it's very, very possible. And I see it all the time. Oh, this little person is dyslexic or has a learning disability. No. Let's just check out their sleep first. Let's check out their diet, their sleep, their exercise, their general overall health before we start labeling this little person as a bit slow.
Wow. Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, it does really come back to sleep. And um, I think there's a prominence of, people who think they have something along those lines, and looking at their sleep, their diet, and the health is really important. And it's a great point to bring up.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's interesting that you say emotionally, everybody, if everybody in the world didn't get the sleep that they want, that's really poorly said. Say that again. If people around the world don't get the sleep that they need, everybody then would be emotional and behaviorally and cognitively challenged. That's not the case. Why is that? Because 1, everybody needs a different amount of sleep, but
Right.
2, people are born with a predisposition, a temperamental predisposition to cope well or not well. If you are born with a predisposition to cope well, you're just a kind of generally good problem solver, and you live in an environment that allows that to nurture. You've got a safe, nurturing environment around you as a young person. You're going to be able to cope with less sleep much better than the kid around the corner who doesn't sleep well and hasn't got those things, is born with a predisposition to anxiety, is born with a predisposition to worry at nighttime or daytime. So we have all these interreacting kind of circles here. of everything that can contribute. We have what we call the nature. I'm born with a predisposition to having less sleep and being more of a worrier. And I have nurture. How do I cope with that, and how am I taught to cope with that? And they interact to make our sleep very impactful. The wonderful thing about sleep is that in pretty much every case I've ever had, you can improve sleep, whether it's a physiological issue, because I did my PhD in a hospital, so I can identify that, a physiological issue or a psychological issue, they are manageable. You can improve them. And therefore, all those things that sleep involves and affects, emotional, behavioral, cognitive, can improve. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. And I love that you brought up nature versus nurture because I know that's a big debate and thing they talk about in psychology. So it's really amazing you brought that up.
Uh-huh.
Um, and talking about long term, so what's maybe a kid is having sleep difficulties in their early childhood, and what you've seen, does that often carry into adolescence or adulthood, or is that something that is temporary and kind of is based on how you change your actions and not something along those lines?
Yeah, another great question. So there's two things there that I think are important. The academic literature does support the fact that if you've got bad sleep, bad in inverted commas sleep as a young person, it is likely to follow through into adulthood and adolescence. And my theory on that, and it's based on evidence, is firstly, that if I've got poor sleep as a little person, why do I have poor sleep? Probably because I've got that temperamental predisposition to something that's in the way. I've got a psychological barrier to sleeping alone. I'm fearful of the dark. I don't want to be separated from my parents. All those temperaments. So that's going to make me, whether I'm a little person, an adolescent, or an adult, I'm going to be more likely to worry about stuff. And worrying about stuff, particularly sleep, is going to make me sleep less. So there's a psychological predisposition that's going to be carried through. Then there's the fact that as a little person, I might or I might not be given the opportunity to have a really, really good sleep routine. To, like you're doing, understand that sleep is imperative. Understand how sleep can be managed and used as a tool to get you where you want to go. It really is important. And if you've got that knowledge and that capacity to do it, then you're going to keep getting good sleep all the way through. If you don't, you've missed, no, not completely, but you've missed a bit of the 8 ball, we call it in Australia, to be able to find your way to good sleep health. Can you learn it? Absolutely. Is it harder as you get older? Absolutely, because other things pop in adolescence that are going to make it harder to sleep anyway. So it's kind of a bit of both, really.
Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds me of like in psychology when they talk about the critical period of kind of learning like stuff that's critical for your health. So, and I would argue
Yeah,
that, sleep and sleep education is one of those things. So it's a great point.
agreed, absolutely.
And I know we've been talking a lot about, quote unquote, how you'd fix a child's sleep, but what advice would you give to parents who are feeling pressure to, I guess, help their child sleep quickly, or if their child's having I guess, rough sleep health or habits? Yeah.
Yeah, that's another really good question. And I guess it's a mixture of social narrative
Mm.
and personal or family need. Many a person, and this goes back to the argument that I told you about the debate in the academic and social literature about sleeping or not sleeping alone.
Right.
And so if we have a little person who is really anxious at bedtime and needs to co-sleep, and parents co-sleep for the purposes of, if I don't co-sleep, no one's getting any sleep, and this is not going to work, so let's co-sleep. And I've just finished a couple of studies actually in Australia where we've interviewed people and asked them when they're pregnant or when they're about to have the baby, are you going to co-sleep? Oh, no. I'm not going to co-sleep. Co-sleeping is not good. I'm not going to do that. I want to have my own space. No, absolutely not. Then they give birth and the baby is one of those babies that needs to be given a lot of attention. And so they end up co-sleeping 70% of the time.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Because that's the only way that they're going to get some sleep. And they stay co-sleeping because they go, you know what? This is great. Why wouldn't I co-sleep? And the reason that they don't is that in many countries, including the States and Australia, don't nurture co-sleeping, thinking that co-sleeping is a culturally, I'm going to say bad habit.
Right.
They say that co-sleeping shouldn't happen. They say that To co-sleep with your child makes them dependent on you. To co-sleep with your child makes your child less able to cope with dependency in the day, and you create a habit that's going to be lifelong. Now, those are three arguments that are in the narrative in the community, and they are all completely false and not based on literature. So culturally in society, in individualist societies like the States, we call them the weird countries, westernized, industrialized, educated, research-orientated, those countries, rich. Those countries are more likely to be individualist in an anthropological sense.
Right.
And in those countries, we nurture and we value independence greater than the collective. And that goes for sleep as well. So we value as parents that our child can sleep alone. We value that we are able to get our child to sleep alone. And sleep is really a marker of good parenting in many, many circles, particularly in social media. So in the collectivist societies, many of the South Americas, some of the Latin countries, some of the Asian countries, co-sleeping is more nurtured and more accepted as just part of the community. So you have a cultural shift there. But we also have a culture, there's subcultures in Australia, much I think like the States, perhaps. We are very multicultural, and all of our population have come from somewhere, except for our Indigenous First Nations. And they all bring with them their cultural preferences about sleeping and parenting. And so we have many subcultures in Australia, which has as a main narrative solo sleeping, but many subcultures that want to co-sleep in between times. And there is a lot of backlash for parents that co-sleep.
Wow.
So it's really interesting that people can feel that pressure. To answer your other question about doing it quickly, that also is a big thing. You know, I have people that come into my clinic at the age of 3 and 6 months expecting their child to sleep through. That, as you mentioned before, is a lack of education, a lack of information from parents, because they're simply not told what sleep cycles look like. Secondly, they might need to get their child's sleep fixed quickly, because they might be dual working families. They might need to get mum back to work or dad back to work, depending on who the main caregiver is or other parent. So it's really important to be able to say, right, I have a problem now because I've got to get back to work, or I've got another child coming, or whatever it might be. So therefore I need to fix this problem. That seems to be, that's a logical reason for you to want to manage your child's sleep, correct? Because the whole family is going to be affected by this. But in and of itself, many parents think that they should get their child to sleep independently as soon as possible because they're just told that that's what they have to do.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of an interesting question, because it's hard to fathom the pressure that parents are under to do this correctly.
For sure. Yeah. I think there is a lot of societal and cultural pressure. And I just have a question out of curiosity. For those cultures that do, think co-sleeping is very normal and they co-sleep regularly, I was just curious, how does it work when the child does grow up? Are they just fine after the parent stops co-sleeping with them, or is there kind of a transitional period where there's a little discomfort for that child as they're growing up?
Another great question. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick lesson in learning theory now, so that you can understand that. Learning theory is very black and white. It's how we train dogs. It's how we train most animals. And if we do something and we get a response that we like, we'll do it again. If we keep doing that over and over and over and over and over, as a child, I want my parent to sleep with me. They sleep with me. I'm good. I'm happy. We go to sleep. Everybody's happy. That is a very successful pathway of behavior. That becomes a neural connection in the brain. It's learnt very fast, so that this baby, this person, this child understands and expects that the parent will lie with them forever. And that's how we do everything. When you look at a child and you smile at them, they will learn to smile back. If you look at a child and you whack them over the head every time, they will learn that that's not a good reaction. My point there is saying that learning theory is very quick, because it's perfect. a system happens, the pathway happens, it is repeated, it becomes a pathway. So it's learned. It's a learned behavior.
Right.
So all learned behaviors can be unlearned. So people that co-sleep because it's allowed or because they want to or for whatever reason, it becomes a habit. Absolutely. It turns out to be a habit for these families that works for them. Absolutely. At some point, it's not going to work for them when the child gets older, when they hit adolescence. I've still got kids in my clinic who are 11 up to 15 co-sleeping with their parents because everybody's fine with that. But suddenly they're not because adolescent wants to go off and get girlfriends and boyfriends and whatever.
Right.
That's a good time to change, I would have thought. So when they get to that point, we can unlearn that behavior with a verbal child, so a child who's actually got language, and clearly the older the better. You can explain to the child, mummy or daddy can't sleep with you, mummy and mummy can't sleep with you. We're going to learn how to be a brave sleeper, all that kind of stuff, which I've also done. I've got a thing called the Boss of My Sleep book, which I've written. It's an online downloadable book that parents can use to get co-sleepers to no longer co-sleep by playing a game that everybody knows what's happening. I'm going to learn to sleep by myself. Now that goes for up to the ages of 8, but it's the same system. So a long answer again to say we've learned to co-sleep because it works. It's no longer working, or either party believe it's no longer acceptable or desirable. We change it. It's just like saying, I'm going to teach you to tie your shoelaces up. I'm going to teach you to brush your teeth before bedtime. It's just a behavior that we learn, and we can change it anytime we like because that's psychological theory and it's perfect. So when parents say to me, and the literature in the social narrative says, if you let your child sleep with you, you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. It's completely untrue. I understand where the fear mongering comes from. Right. I understand parents are worried because if they do pick up their child or go to them every time they cry, that will become a dependency. That's exactly how learning theory works. But you can unlearn it once the crisis moment is over.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for answering my question. Yeah.
Huh.
And then for my last question, for everyone out there, just as interested as me, where can people learn more about your work or access your sleep resources?
Thank you. I do have my website, sensiblesleep.com, or one word. And in there, I've got my sections of sleep education, and they are resources for schools, for families, for there's a lot of stuff up there that's free, mostly because one of my biggest aims was educating families, educating school kids. I've written sleep programs. I'm working with a big company, a big consortium in Canada, and we're putting sleep education from birth all the way through, which is pretty cool. So sleep education, stuff about what to expect from children's sleep. I've got all of that is up on Sensible Sleep, both from a clinical perspective, an academic perspective, and a family's perspective. So hopefully there's stuff up there for everybody. And hopefully this podcast will be up there soon too.
Great. Yeah, I'll make sure to link everything you mentioned down below, even including your book, your website, everything. Well, those are all my questions I have for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I'm sure everyone listening is just as grateful as I am to have you on. And thank you again.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your work. I love it.
Thank you for tuning in to the REM Reward podcast. Before you go, we'd appreciate your support by subscribing, liking, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where we will be joined by a special guest speaker to explore even more about the fascinating world of sleep and psychology.